The echoes of 9/11 continue to reverberate in some very strange places, amongst people's lives very few are aware of. This group of men on an Adriatic beach looks strangely out of place. It's where many go to enjoy the sun, the sea, time with their families. But these men are unable to share this pleasure. They don't know and can't know if they'll ever see their loved ones again. If anybody was in the wrong place at the wrong time, it was Ayub Muhammad and his friends.
My dream was to go abroad to study science. I had a relative in America. I thought I could go there too. When I left China, I was a free man. I had all my documents. I was legal. Now everything has changed. I have no papers, nothing. Even my dreams have been destroyed.
Ayub is in Albania, for almost 50 years a self-proclaimed socialist paradise, but in reality a country controlled by the dictator Enver Hoxha, whose particular form of Marxism meant isolation and political oppression for his people. Though Hoxha and his system are long gone, Albania still has major problems. But there's no doubt that for most of its people, life has improved over the last decade. The same cannot be said for Ayub and his countrymen. They are Uyghurs, and they're a long way from home. They call their home East Turkestan, a Muslim region of Central Asia that has enjoyed only brief periods of independence. Faced throughout the 20th century by the might of the Soviet Union on one side and that of China on the other. After the taking of power by Mao Zedong's communists in 1949, their independence was gone. East Turkestan was now nothing more than the poorest part of China's desperately poor Xinjiang province. Uyghurs say that they and their culture have been suppressed ever since. Ayub met Abu Bakr and Adil Hakim in the mountains of Afghanistan.
In my city Guljar in 1997, there was a massacre of Uyghurs, and many of my friends were imprisoned by the authorities. Political pressure on Uyghurs was getting worse. In 3 years, 30 of my friends were jailed until I had to leave.
China says it is fighting a war against violent Uyghur separatists who have forged links with Al-Qaeda. It's not surprising that many Uyghurs have sought a way out.
The political pressure and business climate for Uyghurs became more and more difficult, and many decided to leave.
They escaped along the legendary Silk Road. This epic caravan route has been used for centuries by Uyghurs as they headed west to trade. Now Ayub and others like him were fleeing discrimination in China. What they couldn't know was that they were walking into a much bigger conflict, a global conflict. They walked into Afghanistan just as the US launched its war on terror.
This is my country, in the northwest of China. Here's my hometown of Kashgar. It's 5,000 kilometers by train to Beijing. In August 2001, I set off on my journey. I went first to Kyrgyzstan, then to Pakistan, and then over to Afghanistan. And that's where my problems began. When we tried to escape back to Pakistan, we were taken in by the Pakistani police and then handed over to the Americans.
The Uyghurs were driven from their homeland by persecution, but they were also being squeezed economically.
After the massacre, Beijing stepped up the migration of Han Chinese to our region, bringing with them a flood of cheap goods, destroying the market for Uyghur people's goods. We heard of a leather factory in Turkey owned by a Uyghur where we could find work, so we left for Pakistan.
I started a small business, but many Chinese were coming to our land and brought many goods with them. This made life impossible for Uyghurs.
Ayub left home at 16 with a dream to study in the US. But that dream was to become a nightmare in the coming months.
We entered Afghanistan from Jalalabad. There was no passport control, nobody. We booked into a small hotel, and after 2 days, we started to hear explosions. At the time, I had no idea what had happened in New York City. We were shocked. We tried to find out what was going on, but no one knew what was happening. One morning, the bombardment was really heavy. My partner went out in the morning and didn't come back. The whole day, I was completely terrified. I decided to run for my life. We went up to the mountains, and there were 2 other Uyghur men. I was so happy to see them. It was just like meeting my relatives. We greeted each other, hugged each other. Then those 2 took me with them, and we went to a cave. The bombardment was getting heavier and heavier every day. I've never seen or heard anything like it. Even if a bomb dropped 2 or 3 kilometers away, it was like you were just underneath it. I was so scared. We stayed in that cave for more than 3 months, not daring to go out. The bombing got heavier, sometimes one exploded at the entrance or on top of the cave. One of our guys said we must run away, get out of there.
Ayub's group survived the Afghan bombing campaign. When they walked to the border with Pakistan, it seemed as if things were looking up.
It took us 3 days to reach the Pakistani border. We ran out of food on the 2nd and we were frozen. It was snowing really badly. Some people at a farm met us, gave us food, drink. Later that night they took us to a mosque and told us not to be afraid. But they also locked the doors behind us. They said it was for our safety. They told us not to worry. Then 4 Pakistani policemen arrived, searched us, put us into trucks, and told us we were being taken to a nice, safe place. Instead, they took us straight to prison. We were shocked.
The Americans were waging war on the Taliban and were offering rewards for any foreign fighter captured. Many Afghans used this as a get-rich-quick scheme, or a way of settling old scores and disposing of rivals from other clans. Ayub and his friends had been caught up in the dragnet.
Then the Americans came and registered us. I came back to my room in handcuffs and leg irons. I was crying. What would happen if my mother saw this? If I died once, my mother would die 3 times over because of this.
Now we were in the Americans' hands. We thought America's a democracy. They will help us find our freedom. So we told them the truth. But the outcome was not what we expected.
3 days later, we're put on an American plane. They tied our hands, feet, covered our eyes. Our hands were tied behind us onto the floor so we couldn't move. We were told not to move, not even to cough, or we'd be beaten. The flight was rough. I was sick. I asked for a cup of tea or water, but nothing came. When we got off the plane, they took our clothes away. It was December. It was freezing. And they made us lie down naked on the cement floor at the airport. Then they tied us with a chain and took us to the camp.
While the journey was harsh, there was much worse to come. Ayub and the other Uyghurs were taken to Kandahar Interrogation Center and held there for 6 months. They claimed that torture was routine.
The American guards pushed us around. They shouted, they swore at us in the camp. They kept pushing us around and laughing until they got bored. That same night they started the interrogation. We were called in one by one. Some of us were beaten so hard they were screaming. But the more you screamed, the more they tortured you. Some guy's face was bleeding. Then comes my turn. The guard stamped on my feet. I had no shoes and he was wearing military boots. My foot was pushed into the sand by the guard. I couldn't scream, I was terrified. I thought I may die here. This may be the last moment of my life. At night they shone a huge lamp in my face. The torture made me regret I'd been born. They asked me the same question again and again.
Interrogation began again. The questions were all about Afghanistan. We told them why we were there, that we were innocent, that our problem was with China and not with America.
I didn't know what I told them, I can't remember because the torture was terrible. When they got tired, they stopped. They took me away. But on the way, they tied me up again. One soldier kicked me in the chest with his heavy boot. I think my ribs were broken. I was unable to breathe. Even now I can't move properly. It's only later on I felt this really strong pain in my chest.
While there is no way of verifying Ayub's story, there are many other accusations of torture and cruelty used by the Americans. They had just invaded Afghanistan and were determined to crush the Taliban as quickly as possible, using whatever means necessary. Ayub's claims of being an innocent victim were ignored.
Over the next 3 days, we were kept naked. We were beaten regularly during the interrogations. The American soldiers kept holding guns to our head. They told us if we didn't tell the truth, we'd be killed or sent back to China, where we would definitely be killed. I tried to tell them how I'd ended up there. I was just trying to go abroad to study. I told them I had nothing against Americans.
Ayub and his Uyghur friends had fled oppression in Western China, and in the process got caught up in one of the biggest dragnets of modern times. They had followed the legendary trade route along the Silk Road into Afghanistan, where they hid for months from the war on terror, only to be sold to Pakistani police and handed over to American troops, who paid up to $5,000 for any foreign fighter captured. They had been kept for months in a Kandahar interrogation center, nicknamed Camp Slappy. The Uyghurs couldn't imagine their lives getting any worse, but that was before they were sent to Camp X-Ray in Guantanamo Bay.
When we got to Guantanamo, there was more interrogation. They were asking the same questions as they had asked us in the Kandahar base, and my answers were the same. Finally, they said, "Okay, we believe you. We realize you were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. We have no problem with you. In fact, we'll help you." And so we believed them. We were even grateful. Later on, when nothing changed, then our attitude began changing. There was no difference in the treatment between the guilty and us, who were innocent. We wanted the world to know about us. We went on a silent hunger strike for 15 days. Some of us collapsed. Medical staff came and took them away. Then the general comes. He promised we would be freed and he asked us to eat, so the hunger strike came to an end. But nothing changed. 1 month later, the general was replaced. Under this new guy, the torture and harassment worsened from every aspect. No medical care, no good night's sleep, not even enough food. We stayed calm, but this angered the guards and they became even more aggressive. At one point, they took all our books away. I stopped eating for a week and collapsed. They took me to the medical center. They asked me why. I said, "Why am I still here, if I'm innocent? If you don't believe me, cut my leg off. If only it'll get me out of here." After all that, our relations with the guards got even worse. Whatever we did, the soldiers punished us.
After 4.5 years in Guantanamo Bay, Ayoub and his friends were finally released, without even an apology. Next stop, Albania. The Albanian government was the only one, amongst all the coalition of the willing to take them.
When I left Kashgar, I left my mother, a brother and 2 sisters, and my wife and 2 kids. My son is 11 and my daughter is 9. What we want to tell the world is that we are in a desperate and hopeless situation. Despite what happened to us in Guantanamo, there is not one country that is willing to receive us, only Albania, and that makes me very sad.
Many believe Albania is trying to win support and aid from the United States government. But this was no help to Ayoub and his friends. They were given no money, no documents, not even a single piece of paper to explain what had happened to them and why. Now there is nowhere else for them to go. Back in China, they would face at least imprisonment and perhaps even death. And without passports, they cannot leave Albania.
When we arrived in Albania, we couldn't find anything to read. There was nothing we could listen to, nobody who could speak our language. There wasn't one piece of paper we could understand. Even now, we find it really hard just going to the shops. And what if we get sick? We can't even explain what's wrong with us. It's really hard to pick up a new language when you can't translate anything.
I left China for political and financial reasons. I left my parents, my brother and sister, and my wife and children. So I left to find a better life for my family, and instead I ended up in Guantanamo. We spent 4.5 years there and were found not guilty and dumped in Albania.
5 years of our lives have been destroyed by the Americans. We can never go home. We will not be able to see our homeland for the rest of our lives. We have no chance to see our parents, and we cannot be reunited with our wives and children. We are the only Uyghurs in Albania, and we are unable to bring our families here. Our future is in total chaos.
Ayoub and the others are housed in a refugee center in a run-down part of Tirana. Our film crew aren't allowed inside, so an Albanian friend did some filming for us.
This is the center. There are about 45 refugees living here. I can't remember a time when there's been a continuous supply of electricity or water. Often we'll go for 3 or 4 days without running water, so we have to get water from outside for drinking, cooking and washing. These are the bars on our windows. The centre is surrounded by a high wall. Above the wall is an electric fence. It's exactly like a prison. The centre is guarded by armed men. Everyone going in or out is checked by them. Even our lawyer from America. His bags are searched one by one. His shaving cream, everything he has gets checked by the guards.
The men live in conditions little better than a prison. The refugee center houses Africans, Kurds, Iraqis and others.
We have 4 rooms between the 5 of us. Each bedroom is 3 meters by 3 meters. We have 2 small beds in each room. We decided to set one room aside for cooking and praying. This is the bedroom I share. I can't remember a time in the last 6 years when I've had any privacy. In Guantanamo, I kept dreaming that I was back home with my family. I'm about to get married. My parents and all my family are around me. It's a very happy moment. Now I have another dream where I see these tough strangers who catch me and tie me up and try to kill me. I always wake up terrified.
For 5 years, Ayub has had no contact with his family. Now a friend in Kyrgyzstan has sent him a laptop containing images from home. Today, with some help, he is clearing it from customs. Could this be the first good news he has had for a very long time?
وش اللندن ما؟ كان في سركال ده. اسمع أيوة. بالكم إنه
At 21, Ayub's life should be just beginning, but he has been robbed of his youth and feels like his life is over. The Uyghurs have been left in a legal limbo on a foreign shore, with no way out. They are, however, the lucky ones. 17 other Uyghurs are still held captive in America's most notorious jail.
Now everything has changed. I have no papers, nothing. Even my dreams have been destroyed. I used to be such a proud and happy guy. Now I have nothing. I don't have a future. I think I've lost all hope.